Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the good folks at WynnBET. They've been our exclusive gaming sponsor all season long, and we thank them for their support. I'm Jeff Erickson here with my guest, Mike Dempsey. If you listen to SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio, you've heard Mike's dulcet tones many times because he is one of the bedrocks of the channel. You can catch him also on the FantasyGuru podcast. You can catch him if you're in the Jacksonville area. Does the Jacksonville the Jaguars Radio Network. He's a game day co-host there, and Jaguars Today on 1010XL. So, Mike, you're a busy man. You have been doing this for a very long time, and we really appreciate you jumping on with me today.
I appreciate you having me, Jeff. I don't know if busy is the right word for it. It's you work 2 hours at a time in radio, but
yeah.
It's a busy time of year as far as radio goes. No question about it. Love doing it, though, man, and good to be on with you.
Yeah, it's good to write and talk about sports for a living. It's one of those things that we've got the world wrapped around our finger. I feel like sometimes we really lucky to have that. But let's talk. There's a lot going on. Let's just jump right into it. The news that I think is interesting is Alvin Kamara back to practice, limited practice today, but didn't practice at all last week. So this has to be viewed as a positive step after missing last week. And I think some of the general vibe was that he was probably going to be able to return this week.
Yeah, they didn't put him on IR, which indicated they thought it'd be less than a 3-week deal. The fact that he's out there on Wednesday, great. Really could have used him last week in one league. Had to play somebody else as a flex option and went with TJ Hawkinson. That one, Jeff. And I lost by a single point. So,
oh, no.
Welcome back, Alvin Kamara. A week too late for me.
They set the Hawk alarm way too soon. Now that's in my parlance there. See, I'm a West Coast guy, so I don't get to hear Guru that much in the mornings there because 3 a.m. is still a little early for me. But, I jumped onto that phrase, and he's so good early on. But when you have zero wide receivers to throw to, it's just, Hawkinson having to deal with that sort of coverage made it really, really tough.
Yeah, kind of weird, though. I mean, the last 3 weeks have been pretty good, all double figures in PPR, and then he gets one target in almost 5 quarters worth of play. So, Jared Goff was miserable and he was banged up, might not even play this week. So that explains some of it, but you'd like more than a single target.
Yeah, it's one of those situations there where the guy tries, in the case of Goff, trying to play through an injury because for the good of the team, when you're actively hurting the team by playing.
Yeah, the good of that team might be to go 0-17 and secure the first pick in the draft, honestly. I mean, the tie doesn't hurt them yet, but if I'm Detroit and I'm their fan base, I mean, you can't say it publicly. The team can't, but I'm rooting for them to get the most important thing you can get, which is the highest draft capital you could possibly have. They're not going anywhere this year. I mean, look, as a guy who supports the Jaguars, we were in that situation last year, and trust me, everybody in Jacksonville was openly rooting for the L's. It sucks to have to be in that position, but that's where they're at right now.
Everybody but the players and coaches who we've learned time and time again, they don't tank. I mean, front offices tank, owners tank, but players have some pride there, and everything they do is being put on tape. So that's interesting there, but it's a fun dynamic. I'm a Bengals fan, so I know all about this. I've been through this many times as well, but there's times when you're better off with the loss. Sometimes you're trying to build a winning culture, but not when you have zero. I get it there. Kamara, if he does play, I'm probably, unless they say he's on some sort of snap count, I'm putting him right back up in the top 5.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, he's not getting the same volume that you'd like in the passing game, but it's a little bit better with Trevor Siemian in there than I think it would be otherwise. And, yeah, I mean, look, the guy, we saw what he did last Christmas, right, with the 6 touchdowns. He has the capability of scoring 2 from distance any given week, and he gets enough touches. Even with Mark Ingram there, it doesn't bother me. In PPR, I can't imagine I'd find 5 guys that want to play over him.
Yeah, I'd agree. One of the guys that is in my top 10 this week, just outside the top 5, but number 6 is A.J. Dillon, getting his first big chance as a starter with Aaron Jones out 1 to 2 weeks of the MCL. They got the bye so in week 13, so I could see him coming back week 14. Really like Dillon this week. Don't love or hate the matchup against the Vikings. I think it's kind of one of those mid-tier matchups. What's your thought on him?
What's not to like? He's going to dominate the touches there. And the big thing is for him is that he's finally involved in the passing game. He caught 4 last week, had 2 this week for 62 yards. So, that, and he's going to get 20-plus carries in this game, which should be a pretty good offense. I think this is a game I expect to be around 30 to 27, something in that neighborhood, similar to what the Vikings did with the Chargers last week. And, so if you have Dillon, you'd have to be stacked. You'd have to have like McCaffrey and I don't know who else, DeAndre Swift and maybe somebody else. Because, as long as you got two with a flex, I can't imagine that Dillon, unless she's on a team that has just fallen out of it and the guys stop putting in a lineup, he's going to be in 95% of lineups this week.
Right. Some sort of weird dynasty or keeper format there where you happen to be stacked
there are
or
a
something
few
like
of those.
that. Yeah. Rumor has it that you might play in a couple of those, but among your 300 lineups that you do or drafts that you do every year, or how many ever it is, and you're just you're crazy. I hear how you're doing drafts like the day after the Super Bowl. I swear, you and Bob. I mean, you live up to the name, Football Diehards.
Well, we do. We draft a lot, but honestly, to me, best ball is just taken over for mock drafting. Mock drafting. Mm-hmm. I was never a fan of because you get 6 rounds in and people get bored, and all it takes is 1 or 2 people to screw around and draft a kicker in the second round or whatever the case. So now, just putting $10 on it, $5 on it, whatever, people at least are incentivized to try. And if you can get 12 good rounds out of it, doesn't really matter what happens after that. So that's, to me, has replaced mock drafting in its entirety. And, the way I look at it, if you can't break even in best ball, you probably should stay away from best ball because it's not that difficult, I don't think, to break even, especially if you play some of those 50-50s to kind of pad your bankroll where you got to finish top 5 out of 12. You do enough of those and you budget your money right. And so I end up doing anywhere from 40 to 80 in an off season. This year it was only in the mid 40s. So it was kind of honestly a quiet year, but I've had as many as 20 going at the same time. That's a little much even for me. Because it comes like a job at that point in time. But I try to keep it below 20, how many teams I have to manage.
I think that's the good phrase.
Basis. Yeah,
that's right. And I'm there. I'm at 17 managed leagues. I might wait 18 because I added a guillotine league at the last moment, which we drafted like before week 2. It was fun because all these leagues I played on, I never got the chance to play in a guillotine league. Wanted to get in it there. And I'm living up to the ethos of that. I'm always like the second worst score, third worst score of the week. That's survive in advance, right?
I love guillotine leagues, man. A lot of people have different strategies in these. To me, like I just think it's so easy again to survive the first month because all you have to do is avoid that catastrophic week. So, yep. I take chances on guys that are hurt. Of course, like this year, I drafted Michael Thomas, held on to him until they officially put him on IR. But I'm still around and kicking. I'm only playing one every year. And, it's fun. It's good to mix up the different variety of the types of leagues you play.
Are you a believer in holding on to your fab and guillotine leagues?
In theory, but come look and see how many dollars I have left. It rhymes with hero. Okay.
Yes.
I have nothing.
I'm right there with you.
I did 900 plus on McCaffrey. So, and he's worth it because without him this week, I probably don't advance.
I spent 90% on Chubb. Same thing. Except hasn't quite always got that same return on investment, but please play this week against Detroit. We need this. We need high volume of Chubb against Detroit. That would be very, very nice, but we'll see. We haven't got word. I'm just assuming he's going to play.
I think he will. We typically assume these guys are going to return, although Ben Roethlisberger, he's fully vaccinated and apparently he was symptomatic. And, even though that can get out of your system, you won't officially necessarily test positive. There's, wonder in Pittsburgh whether he'll be able to go this week. So there's no guarantee until he comes off, but I'm with you. I'm anticipating he'll play.
Yeah. I love Tomlin's comment about Roethlisberger. He's like, we're going to practice as if he's not playing, but if he's able to jump on the moving train, then great, we'll go with him there. So,
well, you're right. It's either the moving train or the train wreck, right? With Mason Crosby, I mean, you can't beat the worst team in the league. We just got done talking about Detroit's tie there. So obviously, Roethlisberger with no practice has to be the best option that they have.
Yeah. You don't like Ben's short passes? Wait till you get a load of Mason Rudolph. 3.8 yards per attempt. Ooh.
He puts so much arc on even the short ones. It drives me crazy. It's just like the ball takes forever to get there. And I'm surprised he doesn't throw more interceptions with defensive backs jumping his routes, but it is what it is.
These last 3 weeks, every time I do a rewatch of a game, I feel like I'm doing everybody a service by watching some of these games. It's just painful. I mean, well, you're a Jacksonville guy. The Buffalo-Jacksonville game, there was just no flow at that game at all.
We love that game now, buddy. You watch your
I bet you did, yeah.
That's our second win. That doubles the win total from 2020. So we're pretty happy with the flow of that game.
Put it in the loop, but it's just if you like yellow flags, it was beautiful. But so many interruptions. Jacksonville defense is getting better. I give them credit for that. That the pass rush is really starting to pick up the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, they've been solid against the run all year. Coming into last week, they were third best in yards per carry allowed. Now, Jonathan Taylor had a huge first quarter, but after the first quarter, he had 11 carries for 23 yards. So
Yep.
they have played basically about 9 good quarters out of the last 10 defensively, but their offense is miserable, as you well know right now. So that's just not necessarily going to be good enough.
Yeah, and I don't think I've seen any improvement from Lawrence. And I know his skill position players that he has to work with are subpar. Losing Chark really hurt. Having Robinson miss a game really hurt. But I just don't see it. I don't see the improvement.
Well, weeks 4 through 6, he got a lot better compared to the first 3 weeks of the season. But then he seemed to have regressed a little bit, like in the last month or so. And, you really right now, you can't count on him at all for fantasy, certainly. I mean, he's not cracking 200 yards some weeks, and he's just not throwing touchdowns. A lot of that is he's got receivers that can't get any separation whatsoever. They don't have a field stretcher. Even though DJ Chark didn't have a large volume of catches, he was averaging 22 yards a catch when he went down. They were supposed to have Travis Etienne, who would have been, everyone's wondering what he would have done to James Robinson's role. Take a look at what Jamal Agnew is doing right now. That is the role they wanted for Travis Etienne. There is room for those guys to coexist. Robinson can get 18 to 20 touches a game with a fully healthy Travis Etienne next year. I'm absolutely convinced of that.
Yeah. And I think those guys and having Chark back frees up Chenault a little bit too. I mean, that's one of, I think that was one that we saw the Cincinnati game where Chark got hurt. We saw a couple big plays from Laviska. We're like, okay, it's Laviska time. This is what the summer hype's all about. And then nothing. And I just think he doesn't have any room to operate.
He doesn't separate. And he really doesn't. He's a big physical guy. He's great at breaking tackles. Might be the best tackle breaking wide receiver in the league, but you can't make your living like that in the NFL. I mean, you have to be able to run away from guys. And he has a lot of drops this year. On top of that, Marvin Jones, I don't know if Marvin Jones is slowing down or it's just the general malaise of the offense. So hard to tell, man. But really, outside of James Robinson and Dan Arnold, quite frankly, is a decent floor PPR play. There's nobody you want to be touching in your fantasy lineups out of this team.
Yeah, I saw the Jones drops against Seattle in particular were pretty bad. A couple Lawrence made one really beautiful throw on a 3rd and 16 right beyond the stick. And Jones just straight up dropped it. And that was really bad. I remember that one.
He makes 2 or 3 of those every week, but this week he also probably threw 5 balls that skipped into his receiver's feet. So he's got to play better. There's no question about it.
For sure. We'll keep on with some more news of the week, but first, quick note from our exclusive gaming sponsor, WynnBET. If there's one thing we appreciate here at RotoWire, it's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with RotoWire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBET is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more at your fingertips. Want a break from sports betting? Head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down on blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at Baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 7 states, Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Mike Dempsey. We are talking about all sorts of news for Week 11. We got the Thursday night game. There's a lot of game time decisions in this one here between the Pats and the Falcons. Starting off with Cordarrelle Patterson, who made it into my top 10 rankings a couple of times already this year. Finally he found a team that could unlock his potential. Now he's got the ankle sprain.
Yeah, deservedly so. He was in your top 10. I mean, going into this past week, if you ranked him as a wide receiver in PPR, I believe he was wide receiver 6, and he was running back maybe 5 in that, up to that point in the season. Obviously got hurt in the game, didn't get nearly the touches that we're used to. I mean, we've already gotten more out of Cordarrelle Patterson than anybody would have anticipated we've been able to get this year. But now that we have it, we've gotten used to it. I mean, I have him in about 6 leagues, and he's an automatic play every single week. I'm really worried about tomorrow night. I'd almost rather they didn't play him, give him the extra time to rest, because my big fear on this, Jeff, is that, first, New England's pretty good at taking your primary guy and at least limiting him, not letting him go crazy on you. And I think he has to be considered the primary guy, even over Kyle Pitts. And then you get the ripple effect if he's not in there. I mean, what kind of coverage is Kyle Pitts going to see in this football game?
That's not exactly what I'm afraid of, because I've got Pitts in one of my big leagues. It's the RotoWire Stake League. We have a side bet. It's a league, but the side bet's on total points of the year. We go out for a steak dinner at the end of the year. 8 of us do this. Top 4 eat for free. 5th place pays for himself. 6 and 7 pay for themselves and 1 other. And the last place pays for himself and 2 others. We call them the double buyer. They can run them about $300, $400. Go to a nice little steakhouse. I've been doing this for 15 years, and it's a great time. But I've got Pitts in that league, so let's draw some of that coverage away from him, please.
Well, no matter how good you are, you got to have some degree of help there. And Matt Ryan's having an okay season, but Matt Ryan's not the type of guy that's going to force it into double coverage all that often. And Kyle Pitts has had a few big drops, right? I mean, look, phenomenal talent. I love the guy. Honestly, I said before the season, I really haven't changed my tune on this. To me, he was the number 1 rookie for Dynasty over Najee, over Jamar Chase. And I love those guys as the consensus top 3 in whatever order, depending on your needs. But it's such a positional advantage when you've got a perennial top 5, not even the number 1 like Kelsey's been. That's unrealistic to expect. But if he's a perennial top 5 guy for a 5 to 6 year run, and he's came into the league, I believe he was 20 at the NFL draft. So, he's incredibly young. I love him, love the talent, and they're going to have to continue to get pieces around him. They need a healthy Calvin Ridley back, and we wish the best for him with whatever he's dealing with. But man, getting back to Patterson here, I'm really fearful that if he plays, you almost have to play because he's been that good this year. And I'm fearful that he's going to have like 8 touches, re-aggravated. Just going to be, it's going to be one of those 30 to 50 yard type games with no touchdowns. And we're all going to be wishing we hadn't played him.
Yeah. They called it a not severe high ankle sprain. And I always thought those are kind of discordant. You think anytime I hear high ankle, I'm like, hey, sit him, rest him. It's like a calf strain. It's always worse than you think. I agree. Rest him this week. I prefer that too. Just get through the week otherwise there. On the New England side, we don't know if Damian Harris is going to play. He did have a limited practice yesterday. We saw Ramondre Stevenson without Harris, though, look amazing against Cleveland. And this is a pretty solid matchup against Atlanta, too. I'd like, if I have Stevenson, please, Damian, take one more week, please.
I'm a fan. This right here, Ramondre Stevenson, is why I want to see us expand fantasy benches on average to 12 players, because it drives me crazy. I have a lot of shares of Damian Harris, and along the way, at certain points, picked up Ramondre Stevenson. But then, even if you have a couple of IR spots, if you've got guys out, you got bye weeks, it's just almost impossible to hang on to all of your speculative running backs. And then you drop them, you've been sitting on them for weeks, and then a week later, somebody else reaps the benefit of it. But he looked great in preseason. He's got breakaway speed, which is something that Damian Harris really doesn't have. But I'm hopeful, based on my shares, that they go back to Harris. I think they could both be flex worthy. Harris is a little touchdown dependent here, and Stevenson's more of a guy. Harris has got to get those touches inside the 10-yard line. Stevenson can take it to the house from wherever. You can't count on that, but at least that possibility exists with him.
100%. And I play a lot of NFFC where they have the 20-man rosters, and then you have a lot of room to stash guys like that. And when you see the talent, you got to get through these healthy scratches and things like that. It's really frustrating, but especially where Stevenson, what was it? The Dallas game, he was great. Then it was a healthy scratch the next week. You're like, what?
And that's probably when I lost my Ramondre Stevenson shares. And that's the game. Honestly, that's the thing, Jeff. There's so many examples of this around the league. I mean, you look at Philadelphia, right? Boston Scott, you think, okay, he's going to be the guy. Jordan Howard gets a lot of second half work. Then it flip-flops, and it's almost all Howard the next week. And then this past week is about an even split. And I know they're not doing it to make us happy, but we long for that consistency, at least of usage. And it's frustrating. That's why guys like McCaffrey are gold, because, the floor is ridiculous. The floor is over a lot of people's ceilings, and we just don't have enough of those.
Yeah, and that's why Najee Harris is so awesome too, because you
Oh,
just know he's getting the volume every
yep.
single week, and that's a beautiful thing. And then also perhaps in that game, Jonnu Smith might not play again. He was limited, I know,
Good.
with the shoulder. And as a guy that has Hunter Henry in a lot of places, that's another one. Please, let's get fully healthy here.
Does it matter? Does it really matter though? Hunter Henry's been on a serious heater. What does he have? Scores in 6 of the last 7, 7
right?
total touchdowns in that stretch. Jonnu played most of that time.
That's true. That's true.
It's odd. You go back to free agency. Jonnu Smith signed, I want to say, in the first hour that free agency was open.
That's right.
This year, right? And then it was like overnight, the Patriots counted their money up again and said, we could go get Hunter Henry too. So clearly they prioritized Jonnu. And I know Bill Belichick's always loved him as a football player, but I mean, you would think he'd have some involvement in the passing game at this point. But I mean, even in the 2 tight end league, of which I play in one, I don't even know if he's rosterable there.
Yeah, agreed. I am in one of those. And boy, it's not fun when you have to pick somebody up, let me tell you. But yeah, and the thing is, we do have a history of the Pats finding use for 2 tight ends. I will say that. If there's any franchise that can make that work, it's them. But he's been hurt a lot. And I think that's really the takeaway is that every time he starts to get in a groove, he gets banged up. So
he's been hurt, and they don't want Mac Jones throwing it 35, 40 times a game either, right? No. And they're winning football games. They have a good defense, obviously very solid plan, the way they run their offense, and Mac Jones is executing that plan. And it's not necessarily going to make him a fantasy star, but they're winning football games. So you can't really argue with their formula from their standpoint, but it's just like Dallas Goedert. I mean, what good is Dallas Goedert if Philly is going to throw the ball 54 times over a 3-game span, which is exactly what they've done? It almost, even Devontae Smith, who's had a couple of nice games in a row, as soon as you start counting on that, he's going to get 4 targets and catch 2 of them for 40 yards.
100%, 100%. And, the thing is, in both cases, it's working. It's working for the Eagles. You limit the exposure to Jalen Hurts. Don't ask him to do too much. He still runs the ball a lot, too. I mean, he's still getting you that product. At least he did last week. The Detroit game, he didn't. That was such an extreme game anyhow. He almost tossed that one right out. But, everyone was yelling at him, run the ball more, run the ball more. They ran the ball more. It worked. Okay. Oh, I guess we'll keep
right. Now,
that.
Watch when Miles Sanders gets back. That'll all change. Right?
Yeah, that could happen this week. Yeah.
Right. He did come off the injured reserve list, or at least he's dedicated or designated to return. Looking for that word, just searching my mind, Jeff.
Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit like CEH, where he'll be designated and start practicing this week, and then you'll see him come back next week. That seems to be the pattern for most teams.
Yeah, Andy Reid said today apparently that they may just hold CEH out because they got the bye coming up, and he may not return till week 13. Which, quite frankly, all my Darrell Williams shares would not be bothered in the least. I do have CEH. I really only have CEH in one league, but he's pretty key to me in that league because I have 0 running back depth whatsoever. It's a really deep dynasty, but man, I'm loving. Who isn't loving what you're getting out of Darrell Williams right now? I mean, what a catch he made! The fact that Mahomes is willing to throw the ball up to him 38 yards and let him outfight a defensive back for the ball in the end zone speaks volumes about the trust he has in him right now. Caught all 9 of his targets this week, so I'd be happy rolling with him. I've got him probably at about a half dozen, and you weigh that versus the one where I've got CEH, you know who I'm rooting for.
Right. I have 0 of CEH this year, but I missed out on him in my dynasty league. I'm only in one dynasty league, and I just wasn't willing to pay that second round price, so I just never got him anywhere. But we'll see. I mean, the thing is, I think they did miss him a little bit because I think he brings a dynamic impact on he doesn't. I think Williams has done well, but I don't think he quite has that same sort of top end speed that CEH has. But we'll see. I wonder, do you think the Chiefs figured things out Sunday night against the Raiders, or is it just a bad night for the Raiders?
I don't know. I mean, it finally looked like Travis Kelce snapped out of his funk. I think what they did was they came out early and they got the ball to Tyreek Hill and didn't try to force it into that umbrella coverage that teams have been throwing against them, and just get it in his hands. Let him beat guys, on the outside. If you get him one-on-one, even if the guy's in great tackle position, he's so quick and fast that he can still make plays. And I think they went to some of that. Kelce had a much better game. Mahomes threw the ball better. Let's be honest. Yep. Mahomes was not throwing the ball great there for a while. I don't know if it's completely fixed, But I like the setup here because I think Dallas is going to get their points. And I think Dallas's defense has played better, certainly this year than they did last year. But I think this is got to be one of the games where you just feel like you got to empty the bench here of your typical usual starters. I don't know about Dalton Schultz. With Gallup back, the targets are
Right.
off. But, in turn, and I know Amari Cooper and even CeeDee Lamb, week to week, there's going to be some frustration with the amount of targets and production. But right now, you could play Dak, you can play CD, you can play Cooper, you could play Schultz at tight end, and you can play both the backs. Zeke's probably a low end one most weeks, and Pollard's probably a flex, and that's more than you're going to get on most teams.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch the status of Tyron Smith a little bit. I knew he was limited in practice today, and that's a big one for them. It's the with and without stats with him are pretty stark, actually.
Oh, no doubt. But hard to believe you'd get away from playing Zeke.
No, I agree. I agree with you on that. It's more
where you would rank him would certainly be a factor, no doubt.
Yeah, that's always something you have to deal with there. Quick note from our friends at Yahoo before we move on. The NFL season is heating up, and Yahoo is going big on daily fantasy football this season. There will be a ton of big prize contests throughout the year on Yahoo, including their multi-entry contest now being shark-free. To celebrate Yahoo going big on DFS as well as Yahoo Daily Fantasy becoming shark-free, Yahoo is giving all users the opportunity to claim free $10 in site credit. Users can take advantage of this free $10 site credit offer to join any paid contest, including Yahoo's biggest contest. The weekly $1 million DFS NFL Baller Contest. The weekly $1 million contest features $1 million in total prizes, including first place receiving $100,000 and tons of overlay in prizes. Play daily fantasy football on Yahoo this season. Visit sports.yahoo.com/dailyfantasy/welcome to claim the free $10 offer to get started. Talking week 11 here, and I see a bunch of questions in the queue. We'll hit those up before we get off the show today, but so thanks for throwing those in. We will hit those up, but a couple more things to talk about. A couple big divisional games. I want to talk a little Minnesota and Green Bay. We mentioned A.J. Dillon already, but also noteworthy, Rodgers and Adams didn't practice today. Undisclosed reasons why. I wonder if it's just a rest day, but something to watch for with such a big game coming up this week.
Yeah, I have so many shares of Devontae Adams. It's not even funny. And most of those are dynasty too. My 19 leagues are about evenly split between dynasty and redraft. So I have tons of investment in Devontae. As you know, he's obviously the first or receiver off the board once Rodgers came back, or certainly no worse than a top 5 middle of the second round guy, depending on when you drafted. Aaron Rodgers hasn't been win you your league good this year, but he's still probably the guy that you drafted to be your starter, and he hasn't killed you most of the time. There's been a few examples. The one week where Devontae was out, of course, the first week of the season, which the Saints just bum rushed him, and then last week in his return from COVID. So I think most weeks I'm going to be able to roll with Rodgers, but absolutely you got to watch that very closely. But the big thing here is, to me, Dalvin Cook has not lived up to it this year, right? He just hasn't been the guy we expected as the consensus number 2 overall pick. But in his last 3 games against Green Bay, he's got 7 touchdowns. So I'm hoping a little AFC North familiarity gives us at least a double score game out of Dalvin this week.
Yeah, he's been a little unlucky too. I saw this stat. 5 times he's been tackled at the 1-yard line, only to see someone else get the touchdown in a subsequent play. So that's one of my least favorite sequences in football is your guy does all the work, gets you the one, and he's not even like a guy you take out in goal line situations. He just happened to go elsewhere, and just you run that that bad luck goal line luck sometimes. That happened with Nick Chubb a couple of years ago, where either Kareem Hunt would come in, or they get stuffed at the one, or the blocking scheme was terrible, or something like that. You're just like, it just drives me crazy.
It's one thing to put Kareem Hunt in. It's another thing to take Dalvin Cook out for Alexander Madison or anybody else for that matter. I mean, the talent drop-off is pretty significant, and Madison's one of the better backups in the league. The only time you should ever take a guy out when he runs it down to the 1 is when he puts his hand up to be taken out. And you tell me, Jeff, how many guys are putting their hand up when the ball's on the 1-yard line? None of them. So, leave them in and make us happy, make your fans happy. I feel, honestly, I know it's probably not the case because they have other things on their mind, but you wonder sometimes if they're not like, hey, watch this. Because, they feel like we could score with just about anybody instead of paying off their guy that everybody would be happy with. They just want to stick it to us.
Yeah, clever coach syndrome. You get that all the time, it seems like. Yeah, absolutely. The other game that I think, and there's a lot of uncertainty with this one, is Arizona-Seattle. Injuries on both sides. Well, in the case of Russell Wilson, did he come back too soon? I mean, obviously, he struggled to get the ball to the wide receivers. What were your thoughts on him?
Well, he did play well, obviously. I mean, he had, around 200 yards and a couple of interceptions, no touchdowns, obviously, in that game. Hardly hit the receivers at all, although he did throw to them each 8 times, the top 2 guys, Metcalf and Lockett. I'm just going to write it off as kind of a rusty performance there. And Green Bay's played pretty solid defense this year, even without Jair Alexander. They've been pretty good. From a fantasy standpoint, I've got them in a couple of spots, and I've been pretty happy with their production. So at least that's what I measure playing good defense by most weeks.
Right.
But I'm willing to give it a shot here and see what happens with Russell Wilson. And chances are, where you have him, he's probably your starter. You know, depending on how you managed when he was out, what you picked up, you probably don't have a better option most weeks. So considering he's got the weapons, even though they want to be a run-first team, I'll give him a pass on the first one back. If it happens again, then we got to wonder if we got a little bit of a trend here.
Yeah, for sure. On the other side, we don't know if we're going to get Kyler Murray or DeAndre Hopkins or even Colt McCoy for that matter, although I think they kind of downplayed McCoy's injury there. But that's kind of a significant factor, especially going on the road to Seattle.
No, it's a huge factor, and it's a 4:00 kick or in that 4:00 window. So,
Right.
if you don't have that other option to pivot to, last week, even though he, that it was trending towards him not playing, but I went with Tannehill in an early game in a league where I have Kyler Murray and just didn't even think twice about it. You just can't trust that he's going to be available. And DeAndre Hopkins, even when he does play this year, has not been anywhere close to the DeAndre Hopkins we've come to know, because he's not getting force-fed the ball nearly as much because they finally have an array of weapons. They're not on the same level as him, but they have enough of them that, when they go, you don't have enough defensive backs generally to match up when you get down to Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk as your 3 and 4, 4 and 3, whatever order you want to list those in. So, if you're playing in an offense that encourages you to hit the open man, you don't need to force the ball to DeAndre Hopkins. He was always quarterback proof because even with bad quarterbacks, they were dumb enough to give him 12 targets a game, even into coverage, and that was fantastic for us. But I mean, look, I don't want to have to play him this week. He's my main quarterback in my guillotine league. I'm still alive, but I'll probably roll Tannehill versus Houston and be pretty happy with that this week anyway.
I got pretty lucky because I also have Murray in my guillotine league, but I picked up Dak. The team that got knocked had Dak, and I was able to grab him. So, Dak against the Chiefs. Yeah, let's roll. We're good.
One thing, let me just, I don't know how early you drafted Murray in that, because the guillotine leagues are 18 teamers now, right? Because one person's getting chopped every week. And so you get down to the end, they usually go 3 or 4 teams head to head over a multi-week period. To me, just one thing I just wanted to mention while I'm thinking of it, I think it's important to have, if you can get one of those top 6 or 7 guys that puts out that 24 to 28 every single week, it is such an advantage. I'm willing to spend a second round pick, depending on where my position is in that format, specifically for a quarterback that I think is going to come through. And I had I want to say the 3rd overall, took Kamara in round 1 and came back with Kyler Murray. And for the most part, up until recent weeks when he's been banged up, been pretty happy with it.
Yeah. Positional advantage. It's the second time we brought that concept up. And it's especially, I think, important here. Like you said, I think we did 14 teams and we also started in week 2. So it's a little bit different. But, the concept still applies, right? And it's still you want to have that, advantage everywhere you can. So, yeah, definitely watching that one there. Excuse me. Just there we go. Little moisture there. Always good. But so that's a tough one. I don't know what to expect out of Kyler if he does play this week, because so much is predicated on his mobility that you're not going to get that this week, I don't think.
Yeah, I think you avoid if you possibly can, right? I mean, you've gotten by for a couple of weeks probably without him, and unless you haven't, and you've just had nothing. If if you're in a position where you get your option is playing Joe Flacco, who's going to get the start, it looks like, for the Jets. I probably want to hang on if at all possible. It looks like Murray's going to play, but I think he's easy to pivot away from right now until we see it. And he's got the bye week coming up as well. So, I think the main thing, if you're a Kyler Murray manager, is will he be healthy for the fantasy playoffs? That's the most important thing. And do you get there? I'd rather him be ready to go at that point in the season than have to rely on him this week.
I'd agree with that. We're going to talk a little Jacksonville real quick, though, but a quick note first from our friends at Thrive. Thrive is back for another season of fantasy football, and they're running huge guaranteed contests each week this NFL season. With Thrive Fantasy, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus on only the top tier athletes that have the biggest impact on the game. Sign up today and get a free 6-month RotoWire subscription. Here's how you can claim your free RotoWire subscription. 1. Visit rotowire.com/thrive. 2. Deposit a minimum of $10 and receive a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. And 3. Play in your first paid contest and receive a free 6-month RotoWire subscription. Big thanks to Thrive, as well as our friends on the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Thank you for your sponsorship all season long. My guest is Mike Dempsey. He does a lot of broadcast work in Jacksonville. He covers both. He does the game day co-host on Jaguars Radio Network, and he does Jaguars Today on at 1010XL. Before we talk about that, though, Mike, there's first a note from the Jaguars. James Robinson didn't practice today. Mm-hmm. I'm not really worried about that. I think that's probably maintenance from what I can read. He looked pretty good against the Colts. Looked pretty healthy.
He didn't look good in the first half. The second half, I don't know what it was, whether it kind of loosened up. He actually, didn't start the game. Carlos Hyde got the first carry of the game. They went 3 and out, had the punt blocked, and then Robinson was in on the second series. But I thought in the first half, he kind of looked a little bit tentative. Usually, the great thing about Robinson is he gets about 2 yards more than any play is blocked for. Yeah. He never gets thrown backwards, and he was getting stuffed a couple of times, and you rarely see that. Even though, where there's no hole, he'll push the pile for a couple of yards. He's very strong and great leg drive, but encouraging what we saw in the second half. Look, the great thing, too, is he gets involved in the passing game, and I think hard to believe you've got the kind of depth to not play James Robinson if he is active this week, which as of now, I don't have any reason to believe he won't be. I'm with you. I'll believe today's a maintenance day until we find out otherwise.
Yeah. I did the rewatch of that game, and I thought there was a huge sequence early on in this game. 3rd and 1, Colts 48. For whatever reason, Hyde was in the game instead of Robinson. They ran a slow developing play up the middle, lost a yard. They punted from midfield. They were already down 17-6 at the time. And Colts turned around and got a drive for a field goal there. And those 3 points mattered. Plus, just you lost. You had pretty solid field position, a good chance to score. And that sequence of plays, giving it to Hyde and then punting when it didn't work, it just drives me up a wall seeing that.
Well, yeah, and look, the thing is, Jags were 5 out of 15 on 3rd down. Don't know if, had they gone for it, I would have had all that much confidence that they would have made it. And their defense was playing better. I mean, really, after that first quarter, and you include the fact that 7 of those points came on the special teams and not the defense, they allowed 2 field goals the rest of the game. So I think that was a case where the offense was going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. They went 6 of 7 drives in the first half. I just think they had no confidence that we're going to be able to convert this. We're going to give them the ball in prime position. So let's punt it away. Let's trust the defense, which honestly right now, which is hard to believe the way this defense started the season, that this could be the better half of any football team. But they played okay in the last few weeks. The run defense has gotten better. They simplified a lot of their They were substituting en masse on the defensive line, and they're getting out of position. There's a lot of, looking around like I'm in the right spot. There are a lot of 12 men on the field issues, just general not in sync. And they've simplified a lot of concepts. They've switched away from playing a lot of man to a lot more zone, still mixing in man. And it seems that they've hit their stride. Keep in mind, look, Urban Meyer's first-time head coach in the NFL. Joe Cullen's first-time defensive coordinator in the NFL. You got a ton of youth on that side of the ball, plus a lot of free agents that came in defensively particularly. So it's taken them about a half a season to figure out on that side. I can't tell you how long it's going to take on the other side of the ball right now, but at least we're encouraged in Jacksonville that the defense is starting to come along.
That's good. Your thoughts on Urban Meyer? I know he was kind of a national punchline for a while, but, he's had winning experience at a lot of different levels. I know he made some mistakes, both hiring and obviously sticking around in Ohio instead of going back to the team and all that. But he's not an idiot. He's obviously had a lot of success along the way. Are people feeling more comfortable with the job he's doing in Jacksonville now?
Well, some are. All right. And some aren't.
Yeah.
He's not an idiot. I understand the sense you're talking about. You can't win 3 national championships and be a complete fool. But he's done some idiotic things here along the way. I mean, the Chris Doyle hiring was like, what are you doing? I mean, how do you not know that this is going to be an issue? And then the staying behind in Ohio. I mean, honestly, the bigger, and we have on our show Jaguars Today, we have a lot of former Jaguars that are co-hosts. They'll come in, they kind of a revolving door, different day of the week. And to a man, they weren't so much embarrassed by the video, by the fact that he didn't travel back with his team.
Right.
And his whole thing is his slogan is own it this year. And where is taking ownership of a team that was struggling? They had a good performance, but they lost in overtime. And, you fight together, you win, you lose as a team. Look, you've got the rest of that time because it was a Thursday night game. You can come home. You can take Shad Khan's private jet back to Cincinnati. I'm sure he would have flown you up there. It seemed like a very easy mistake to avoid. And that's been the issue with him. I'll say this. He knows what he doesn't know. Whether you like the hires of Bevel and Cullen as the coordinators, he knows he hasn't coached at this level. And you'll notice Urban Meyer doesn't wear the headset on the sideline hardly at all. He doesn't micromanage his coaches during the game, sometimes to a fault, to where he probably does need to be a little bit more involved. Look, I was opposed to the hire. Right. I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't. I honestly, anybody but Urban Meyer, quite frankly, based on his track record. And I don't want to get into the whole litany, but I said, once he got hired, I'm going to root for the guy to have success. Look, they've won more games than last year. That's an incredibly low bar. But for folks in the national media, I think there's a lot of animus towards him, understandably so. But I think missteps that he has, like people lump in drafting Travis Etienne in the first round with some of this other stuff. Well, that's a philosophical football decision, right? I mean, like you have a good running back, I get it, but they're planning on using Etienne differently. Well, that's as bad as hiring Chris Doyle. They're completely different categories. So look, he's an easy punching bag, and he's earned it over the years with some of the decisions that he's made. So nobody's feeling sorry for Urban. We just want to win football games in Jacksonville. Don't ruin Trevor Lawrence. That's the biggest job that Urban Meyer has for the rest of this season.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So are you born and raised Jacksonville? Is this your kind of where you grew up, or how did you get involved in covering the Jaguars? What's your background?
Born in Connecticut, moved to Florida when I was 9. That is a long time ago now.
Yep.
And grew up about an hour from St. Augustine, Florida, where I live now, which is about an hour south of Jacksonville. And ended up going to college in St. Augustine, met my wife there. We settled in St. Augustine. And, we were both psychology majors. I had a psychology degree that I wasn't using. Always a, lifelong sports fanatic, and just decided one day, listening to some bad sports shows back in the 1990s. Honestly, the worst, the Pete Rose show is the one that encouraged me to get into it. Pete Rose was a terrible host, but he got the greatest guest because he was Pete Rose. And I'm like, man, I think I could do as well as this guy talking sports, and we all think that, right? And so, went back to school, got a broadcast degree, which, by the way, totally unnecessary to do the job I do, but that's another story. And then just got into local radio, and right about the time that the Jaguars came into existence. So it was very fortuitous timing. Worked in St. Augustine hosting shows for about the first 4 or 5 years of their existence. Got into Jacksonville, got an afternoon drive slot back in 2003. And ever since then, I've been on the air in one time slot or another. And then we became the official flagship station of the Jaguars this is, I think, our 8th season of that. And that opened a lot of doors. And, working with Maurice Jones-Drew in Jacksonville opened doors for me at SiriusXM because they wanted him to do a show, and he had worked with me before. So, it's my life is a series of right place, right time, Jeff.
I hear you on that. I'm a poli-sci. I had a poli-sci major. I have a law degree, and I use neither. And I started doing broadcasts when when XM, before they were separate. Sirius and XM were separate. They were launching a baseball channel, and they put out for bidding to host a 1-hour fantasy show. RotoWire won it, and they're like, Jeff, you go do that. You do more radio than anybody else. So, okay. I have no radio, TV, film background whatsoever. I can attest that you do not need a broadcast degree. I mean, it helps to have some polish. You learn stuff along the way. I had a minder, if you will, a veteran broadcaster. Phil Wood was my Mike Dempsey to Mike Dempsey to MJD. Phil Wood was to me, except the fact that I didn't have a playing experience or bring any big names or anything like that. But you get better and better with more experience, and it's been a fun ride. I get to write and talk about sports for a living. It's awesome.
If I could say that, honestly, people ask me all the time, how do I get your job? Well, first, you can't have it. Okay. So
Right.
You can have some similar job, but not mine, please. But the two things I always tell people are, number one, volunteer at a college radio station, because they take community volunteers with no experience. My first radio gig, I went into the college radio station when I decided I wanted to go back for broadcasting. I said, I want to be on the air. And the guy goes, what are you doing tomorrow at noon? I'm not kidding. and I said, well, I don't know, nothing. And he goes, well, you're hosting a classical music show tomorrow at noon. I know nothing about classical music, but I can study enough to, play a few 15-minute pieces and introduce them. And that was literally my first show. And then it just went from there. So number one, volunteer, because you're right. Nothing beats reps, man. I mean, just to have to fill airtime and do it for hours on end sometimes, just if you can do that, and you go on to a show like on SiriusXM where you have phone calls stacked up waiting for you, it's like it really isn't like work. And then the other thing is just never say no to anything. Right? I did a lot of in college when I went back. I did a lot of basketball play-by-play. Did a lot of sports, but I didn't do baseball. But I grew up as a baseball fan, so I got a chance when one of my stations was hosting games for the AA affiliate of the Dodgers, the Jacksonville Suns, who are now the Jumbo Shrimp. And when we got the broadcast rights, they said, hey, do you do baseball? I said, absolutely. I do baseball. Tons.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
You don't say no to anything, Jeff, right? I mean, I try it and fail, fine. But saying no, man, you don't know. Get in there and fake it till you make it. I truly believe there's a lot of that. I mean, you have to have some level of ability to do it, or you're going to fail ultimately. But I got to do 5 years as a professional baseball broadcaster because I was smart enough to say yes.
And if you say no, they may not ask a second time.
They might not. You're right.
Yeah. That's definitely some of the trick here. Yeah, we're going to do a couple questions. I know you got to get out here, so we're going to hit a couple of these questions. They're up in the queue. Thank everybody for jumping in on this. F says, I trade away Aaron Jones, Deontay Johnson for David Montgomery and Brandon Cooks. Good trade, bad trade? He thinks that David Montgomery might be a league winner for the playoffs and didn't want to wait for Jones to come back. What do you think?
Boy, I'd be hard-pressed to make that deal. I mean, for one, Deontay Johnson is just so steady week to week in terms of the targets, and Brandon Cooks is all over the place. I mean, it's a hot start to the season, but since then, very few games that you'd want him in your starting lineup. And I get it. Look, you may be able to break even on this deal because Montgomery's going to dominate touches for Chicago, whereas clearly A.J. Dillon's got to roll, even when Aaron Jones is healthy here. But I just think better overall offense is going to produce more scoring opportunities. I would have rather had the Jones-Deontay side.
I agree with you on that one there. Let's go on to Michael. He wants to talk a little Kyle Pitts. This is not a dynasty league. It's redraft, I believe. Pitts, Gaskin, Renfro. What does that get him as terms of running back? These are always tough questions to answer because, like, who's available, context of everybody else. But you can offer.
First of all, take Gaskin out and you might get more. I'd start, honestly. People see Gaskin in there like, why are you trying to dump Gaskin on me? But maybe, honestly, lead with Pitts and Renfro and say, hey, I'm willing to give you Gaskin if that helps you, and it's the same deal. I think there is a lot of psychology to how trades get done and offered, but I'd like to say like a DeAndre Swift kind of guy, but it's not like Kyle Pitts is dominating on a weekly basis. He's I want to say top 7 in PPR among tight ends, but the difference between that and like the 10th tight end is not that great. And Renfro's a solid wide receiver 3. So, I mean, I think I'm shooting way high when the first name that came to mind is DeAndre Swift. I'm thinking more about draft position. Like I'd like to get a guy who came off the board somewhere in round 3. I don't know. I can't give you a name specifically, but I think the key here is you find the team that would most need Kyle Pitts. And you start there. And there have to be a couple of tight end deficient teams. And then you look for the one that has the best surplus of running backs. And, you've got these pieces. Does Renfrow make sense for this team as well? Or are they loaded at receiver? Maybe you have to pivot to something else. I think it's more so I don't go looking for specific players. I look for specific trade partners. What do you need that I can provide you to give me what I need?
Find the team that's got Cooper Kupp on bye this week. Maybe use it. Hey, you got Renfrow you can plug in. Plus, you can upgrade at tight end. Now,
I'll give you all that. I'll give you Gaskin. I'll give you my firstborn, and you can give me Cooper Kupp. And that seems like I'm still winning that deal.
There you go. This week, Tua or Herbert? Herbert's been really frustrating lately. One good game out of the last 4.
Boy, all right. I'm going to say, assuming that Tua is 100%, and we have that feeling going into it. The matchup is so good against the Jets. I honestly, I don't know if I'd have the stones to do it because I don't have this decision to make in any league. I got a few Herberts. I have one Tua, and it's in a super flex, and I only have to decide versus Justin Fields every week. So for the second QB spot, I think objectively, I'd like to say Tua, but again, I'd have a tough time doing that in my own lineup. It's why I'm not an analyst, Jeff. I'm just a radio host who has an opinion, is all I am. I don't have to do like you guys do and put out those top whatever rankings every week, and I have a lot of respect for that.
Chris always gives me a hard time. It's like, you get to deal with those rankings, Jeff. He gets to be the guy's pundit on our show.
Exactly.
We'll do one more here before we let Mike go. Should I trade Hurts and Brandon Cooks for Jamar Chase, Russell Wilson? That seems like you're getting a lot for Hurts and Brandon Cooks. Way too much, actually. I don't even need to get it.
You stop at Jamar Chase, and the answer is yes.
Yes.
Right? I'll find. Look, now Hurts has been nice, right? He's been, for the most part, very consistent, but what's consistently happened the last 3 weeks is they're limiting how often they need to throw. They play a series of terrible offenses down the stretch. And if teams are not pushing them offensively, putting up big points against them, they're going to stick with that formula. He's thrown it 54 times in the last 3 games. That's, 18 a week. That's just simply not enough to count on. Right. He gives you a decent floor, but he's a safe guy who generally won't beat you, but I don't think he's a league winner this year either. Jamar Chase is a league winner, man. He could go right to the top of your wide receiver depth chart. So that anything else you get thrown in with Chase, heck yeah, I'm doing that deal.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Mike, I know you got to go. You got a podcast host. When can people catch you? Because I know you're in a lot of places. You're omnipresent.
All right. Mondays and Thursdays, 10 to midnight with Bob Harris on Football Diehards on SiriusXM. Every other Tuesday with Michael Fabiano on Fantasy Dirt from 8 to 10. Saturdays, 5 to 7 with Bob on the Fantasy Channel. And then we do another 3-hour show that night on NFL Radio that starts at 8 o'clock. And if you're really into Jaguar football, you'll find me all over the Jaguar Radio Network and on 1010XL, which you can stream at 1010XL.com if you really want to get a deep breakdown of what's going on in Jacksonville from 10 to noon every day.
Well, we do have a question in the queue about Jamar Agnew, so I'm sure you can get all the Agnew content that you want on that as well. And then you're doing a podcast too, right?
Yeah, we do a podcast, just kind of a game preview. We do it Wednesday nights, so that'll drop sometime tonight at FantasyGuru.com, and appreciate having the chance to do that. Look, I love talking fantasy football, Jeff, like you. I appreciate you having me on. I'm happy to share my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. I never once have referred to myself as a fantasy expert. I don't even consider myself really a fantasy analyst. I think there are so many smart people, and we hear them every day, every season when they call in with really interesting strategies and thoughts. So, we just are the ones who are lucky enough to present it and hopefully in entertaining fashion. And that's about the end of it for me.
Indeed. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Mike, thank you so much for joining me, and look forward to listening to you and Bob. I caught you a lot on Saturday night, actually, so it was good on the NFL channel. So that was cool.
We appreciate you, buddy, and it's been great being a colleague of yours for a long time now over at SiriusXM, so continued success for yourself as well.
Thank you very much. That's going to wrap up today's podcast. We've got Mario and John tomorrow. Thanks to WinBet for their exclusive gaming sponsorship all season long. Thanks for listening. Take care.